Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This went down just last week, and I'm finally in a good place to share what happened. Not sure if it qualifies as a true pro move, but it definitely wasn't petty either. I'm a long-haul trucker, and on the roads across the country, there are truck stops with a pay-to-park system. Usually, around 10-20% of the spaces are marked as reserved, and each spot costs anywhere from $15 to $25. The truck stop where this all went down had reserved parking for $17, which is pretty cheap for a guaranteed spot. The reserved spots are good for 24 hours, from 4 p.m. one day until 3 p.m. the next afternoon. I knew I had a late delivery that night, so I arrived at the truck stop around 3:30 p.m. and paid for a reserved spot. I let the manager, let's call her Sarah, know that I had a delivery later that night but would be back to clear out the spot by the next day's deadline. Sarah said that was fine and that she'd marked the spot as sold, so if anyone else tried to reserve it, she could deny them based on her notes. At 11:15 p.m., I headed out for my delivery run. I didn't get back to the facility until 2:30 a.m. the following morning. Exhausted, I drove back to the truck stop to reclaim my paid spot, only to find that all the reserved spaces were occupied. I called the overnight manager, we'll call him Mike, and after giving him my info, I let him know that someone was parked illegally in a reserved spot without paying. Mike sent his colleague out to start checking trucks. The culprit turned out to be a company driver from Hallco, one of those big firms with the bright orange trailers. The colleague started banging on the driver's door, telling him he was parked illegally and needed to move his rig. From my vantage point at the fuel island where I'd been told to park temporarily, I could see the whole commotion unfold in my side mirror. The Hallco driver answered the door, beer bottle in one hand, and what looked like a joint in the other, trying to be discreet here for the mods. The colleague informed him that he'd have to move or get towed and have the cops called. Well, this driver was furious that someone dared tell him where he could and couldn't park. He slammed the door in the colleague's face, threatening him. The colleague called the police and a tow truck, and the cops arrived first. Now I used to work for Hallco, so I know their policies inside and out. Alcohol in the cab, big no-no.
Anything other than cigarettes or cigars, also forbidden. A firearm of any kind, especially loaded, absolutely against the rules. This guy had all of that contraband and more stashed in his truck.
The cops hauled him away in cuffs, and his rig got towed to the impound lot. Once the dust settled, I gave Hallco's safety director a call to let her know what had happened with their driver and where his truck would be. She thanked me and said the guy would definitely lose his job over the alcohol, drugs, and firearms violations. Sounds like he played a stupid game and won a stupid prize. The loss of his entire trucking career. The first one is an entitled people story. My neighbor Karen was the president of our homeowners association. She was always sticking her nose where it didn't belong and trying to control what people did with their property. One day I decided to build a shed in my backyard. I got the proper permits from the city and made sure I wasn't violating any ordinances. As soon as Karen saw the construction starting, she came marching over. "You can't build that ugly thing," she shrieked. "It violates our homeowner association rules about outbuildings." I calmly explained that I had verified with the city that the shed was allowed. Karen wouldn't hear it. "Take it down right now or I'll have you fined," she yelled. I refused, so Karen sent me a formal letter saying I'd be fined $50 a day until the shed was removed. That's when I called my lawyer. He reviewed the homeowner association bylaws and found that they only restricted sheds in the front and side yards, not the backyard. We met with Karen and the other homeowner association board members. My lawyer pointed out that their rules didn't apply to my backyard shed. Karen's face turned red with anger. "How dare you?" she snapped. "I decide what rules apply in this neighborhood." My lawyer sternly informed her that she couldn't make up arbitrary rules. Since their bylaws didn't prohibit backyard sheds, the homeowner association had no authority to force me to remove mine. Karen refused to back down. "That ugly shed is destroying our property values," she declared. "I'll see you in court." My lawyer calmly replied, "That won't be necessary. My client legally owns this land and has every right to build on it. If you waste time and money on frivolous lawsuits, we will seek damages from the homeowner association." Karen glared at him and stomped off. She knew she didn't have a leg to stand on. Thanks to my lawyer's ruthless lesson, the homeowner association finally left me alone about my shed. It felt great finally owning my land free of Karen's control freak interference. The next one is a petty revenge story. Finally, I have something to contribute, so next week will be a major eclipse in the US. I booked a hotel almost a year ago with a free stay perk night in a good hotel in the path of totality. I don't think the booking algorithms had accounted for the eclipse at the time. Fast forward to today, where you can't find a room nearby for less than a king's ransom, and everything is booked to the max. As it turns out, my plans have changed, and I went to cancel the room, but their cancellation policy is that I'm too late to cancel 1 week out without being charged a small fee. Called the hotel directly to explain that if they won't charge me the cancellation fee, I'm happy to cancel my reservation, and they can certainly make 5x the normal rate for this once-in-a-lifetime event on the room. Turns out their policy is their policy, and they can't waive the cancellation charge. Fine by me. I'll keep the free night reservation and won't cancel after all, but boy, that will be a wasted opportunity for them. I like to think that because of my pettiness in not canceling after all, at least the hotel staff won't have one more room to service, and greedy corporate isn't going to be able to fleece someone with my empty room over the eclipse. The next one is a malicious compliance story. A bit of a backstory. I divorced my ex a little over 9 years ago after 14 years of marriage. I won't go into the specifics as to why, but suffice it to say he was a lying, cheating jerk. Early on during the marriage, I tended to not be all that assertive until I finally had my fill and grew a backbone. He hated that. He did not like hearing the word no from me or in doing things my own way. So fast forward to a month after we were officially divorced. He was in his new place and I was in my house, formerly the house we shared, with our sons, but he still had a ton of his stuff there. Stuff I didn't want even though I paid for a lot of it, but stuff I knew he really wanted. He finally reached out and demanded, not asked, demanded I send him his stuff, just toss it all in boxes and send it over to him. His exact words. Mind you, he was only about 10 miles away from me at that point, and could have easily come over to do it himself. He didn't want to do that because he'd have to see me. Something he was actively trying not to do. Cue the MC. Now, a lot of what he had were collectibles. No details, but some of it was fairly expensive and fragile. So I did as he asked. Correction, demanded. I tossed it all into numerous boxes. Now, some of the truly expensive items, I did take great care in packing them, only because I knew my sons would probably eventually want them. But for the stuff I knew my ex really wanted and cared a lot about, nah, I just tossed it all in a box without a care in the world. Now, I did inspect everything, and while I just dumped them in boxes, nothing was damaged by me. I also took pictures of it to prove it, so once I closed them all up, I told him to either to get his ass over to pick it up or get someone to do it for him. He got someone to do it. Now, I was not at the house when this person picked everything up, but my sons and sister were. They did not know how everything was packed. They only showed him the boxes. They told me that the person who picked up the boxes quite literally just tossed them into the back of his pickup without a care in the world and then sped away. Later that night, I got a call from my ex who started calling me an idiot for destroying all his stuff. I told him that everything was fine before I closed the boxes up and I had proof of it. I then said that maybe next time be a bit nicer to me when making requests, and reminded him he demanded that I toss it all in boxes. But he didn't tell me to be gentle in doing so. I hung up on him and proceeded to enjoy my celebratory glass of wine that evening, hoping that he was enjoying the shattered remains. The next one is an entitled people story. My cousin, let's call her Amy. She currently is a nanny for a new family, and it's going well. She made the mistake of not setting boundaries with the first family. When she was hired for the first job, she was told the family takes a vacation every year to the beach in Disney World, Florida, and how beautiful it is and how lucky she will be to be able to go. My cousin said her idea of a vacation would be to go skiing, noting the fact her idea for vacation is not theirs. So in August, the parents were beside themselves because Amy had not committed to going on vacation with them. The father said to her via email something along the lines of she should feel honored to be able to get a free trip to Disney World and how expensive it is she'll never be able to afford to go on her own, as if she wanted to go in first place. Here is the problem the family don't seem to understand. This is your vacation, not your nanny's. This family has 4 kids, ages 3, 6, 8, 12, and she works her ass off when she has them. My cousin said she was having panic attacks thinking about trying to keep 4 kids safe at Disney World because the parents are useless when she is around. Safer times when the mother will want her to go to family outings, and the agreement is they work as a team. The family tried throwing in her face her airfare and travel would be paid for, so she would be expected to take a pay cut. There is no much more to this story, but I am so proud of my cousin for refusing to go and letting the family know this is a vacation for them, not her. Families who can afford a traveling nanny, let alone a nanny, is considered a luxury to most. You need that nanny go on vacation with you more than that nanny wants to go. So what is God forbid the nanny may end up enjoying herself one night? You should want your nanny to enjoy herself even if one night, so she will go next year. And stop with the culty your family that only leads to manipulation. Your nanny is your nanny. The next one is an entitled Parent's Story. I just gave birth to our second kid a week ago. The past week has been rough. Baby blues, bleeding nonstop down there from the dinner plate-sized wound in my uterus, feeling of uncertainty, not sleeping enough, compounded with the fact that my newborn cried for 2 nights in a row when we first brought her home. I would get up and weep for a good half hour before starting my day. To say I was a hot mess would be an understatement. Things improved a little the past couple of days. I was able to get about 4 hours of shut-eye each night. I thought my baby blues were getting better, but I would still get overly emotional thinking about random things like not being able to spend more time with my older kid and feeling like an incompetent mom in general. My parents are in town to help us out, essentially playing postpartum nanny to me and helping with the kids if needed. They arrived 2 weeks ago and haven't really needed to deal with the kids too much since my husband is home on paternity leave, and my older kid goes to preschool during the week. My parents' main role so far has been to cook me postpartum food, making sure everyone is fed, and helping my older kid get ready for school in the morning if my husband is too busy. My husband tried to educate my parents about baby blues and postpartum depression and told them specifically that I am currently in a very vulnerable state. My parents, however, seem to have brushed it off because, in their words, they have never known anyone who suffered from it. Even when I tried to talk to them and got teary-eyed from my emotions, they were disappointingly dismissive and basically told me to stop feeling sorry for myself. This morning as I was having breakfast, my husband set my newborn down for a nap in the living room bassinet. She was drowsy but about to doze off. My dad came over and stared and made funny noises at her, which woke her up more. I got impatient and told him to stop stimulating her since it's time for a nap. My tone might have been a bit harsh, but I was not scolding him. It's purely out of impatience. My mom overheard me and immediately yelled at my dad to get up and go back to their room. Right away I can feel that she's mad at me for what I said to my dad. Knowing her, whatever she yelled at him was really her passively telling me off. After that incident, she went ahead and gave me the worst attitude, slamming doors, ignoring me when I tried to talk to them, etc. I had an opportunity to talk to my dad and asked him what's going on. He said my mom is mad that I talked to him in such a harsh tone. That was when the floodgates opened and I started crying. I told him I have more than enough on my plate right now, and I don't understand why I have to appease my mom too. It's like having to take care of another child. I did not mean anything bad when I told my dad to shush so the baby can sleep, but my mom's interpretation took it to a whole other level. That on top of my already messed up hormones sent me into uncontrollable wailing. My husband saw what was happening and flew into a rage, demanding that my mom stop whatever passive crap she's throwing at me. My mom's response is to become hysterical herself and yelling that she did not say anything to offend me and that I have been incredibly rude to her and my dad since I came home from the hospital. She even called me a liar for supposedly feeding falsehood to my husband that paints them as the bad guys. My husband said he does not care what her defense is, but making a 1-week postpartum mom cry is not acceptable. He told me to go to my room to be away from the negativity. While I was leaving, my mom continued to hurl insults at me, saying things like, "You reserve all your good temper for everyone else and give your parents the crappy end. And you are a mom yourself. How can you behave like this?" My husband was caught between arguing with her and trying to get my older kid away from her grandma's temper tantrum. In his words, my mom was acting like a total brat in front of our toddler, and that was unforgivable. Anyhow, my husband is bringing my older kid to his mom's house to get away from the bad juju. I am seeking refuge in my own bedroom with the newborn. I'm too exhausted to deal with my mom's baddiness. Essentially, I'm a prisoner in my own home for the moment, all while trying to recover from childbirth. The next one is an entitled Parent's Story. I, 43F, and my husband, 45M, live on a rural 4-acre mini farm. We're both professionals and child-free by choice. I'm not a big fan of small children. I'm never sure how to react to them. I may be a bit on the spectrum. And I find their loudness and restlessness extremely irritating and off-putting. My personal space is very important to me, and I consider my mini farm with all my lovely pets a sanctuary of sorts. I foot all the bills for the animals and do pretty much all of the caretaking. We have horses, goats, chickens, cats, and dogs. While my husband enjoys the occasional romp with his nephews, he has no desire to parent anyone, and he generally just tolerates all of my pets. Anything that distracts him from his primary hobbies of video games and D&D is off the table. We needed some professional handyman help, as our house is quite old and we don't have enough time in the day to get all the little maintenance projects done and maintain our careers. One of my husband's employees volunteered her boyfriend as his side hustle as handyman work. We arranged a date and time for him to come out and quote us some work. She mentioned to my husband that he may need to bring his child along. When my husband mentioned this, I asked him how old the child was and if the child could be expected to behave since our home is not exactly childproof. If you touch our walls the wrong way, you can get bad splinters since it's all reclaimed wood. I've done it several times and it sucks bad. My husband had this conversation with his employee, and I was assured the child was old enough to mind himself, and all would be well. The night of the quote date, I was informed that my husband's employee would be coming along with her boyfriend to mind the child. I was quite confused because why wouldn't she just mind the child at their home and let her boyfriend come alone? I asked my husband this, and he said she wanted to see the horses. I asked him if he had actually invited her to come over, and he said no. She just basically announced she was coming. I told him she was rude and presumptuous. But whatever, let's just get it over with. They show up. There's not one child. There are two. She brought her kid as well, which I'm only just finding out about as the child rockets his high-energy ADHD 3-year-old self out of the van and proceeds to start noisily chasing my free-range chickens all over the front driveway. And her boyfriend brings his teenage brother as well as his 5-year-old, who proceeds to crawl all over my barn and rob me of all my free-range chicken eggs as the 3-year-old propels himself around the barnyard screaming his head off, stripping off shoes and socks, bouncing off hay bales, and trying to chase all my goats down. This woman proceeds to pretty much ignore me as she sticks her hands and face all over my two lovely but very sensitive rescue horses. One is an ex-racehorse and the other was from an abusive home she was forcibly removed from. And talking at me the whole time about how awesome her friend's therapy horses are, and pausing only to scream at her out-of-control child that she is alternately ignoring and somewhat attempting to discipline as he climbs my fencing, and gets my friendly goats riled up to the point where they want to play headbutt with him, which would be super bad for him. One of my friendliest goats, who is definitely ready for playtime after all the excitement, walks over to the egg-thieving 5-year-old who was kinda just minding his own business, and proceeds to headbutt him in the chest. Goat was playing, but the kid was tiny, and the kid goes flying. The kid bursts into instant scared tears. He wasn't really hurt, it just scared him. And I'm left trying to figure out how to comfort this little stranger that I've only just met 5 minutes ago. Super awkward for me. I'm not good at it. The woman that inflicted herself upon me is too busy chasing down and screaming at her demon spawn to be watching both kids, and at this point I'm just completely bewildered and ready for this whole ordeal to be over. After the headbutt, I close up the barn and kick them out. The 3-year-old is just running around my yard like a little tornado, screaming his little head off, and the 5-year-old keeps coming up with broken chicken eggs in his pockets from when the goat knocked him over, probably. The whole thing was a goddamn 3-ring circus that I did not sign up for, and I'm still kinda salty about it even 3 days later. For the love of God, woman, if you're going to impose yourself on others uninvited, at least have the decency to get your kid in line first. Talk about entitled. Also, maybe go see your friend with the therapy horses and leave me and my farm out of it. Also, it's my house too, and I wanted to talk about the work being quoted, not play nanny tour guide. I don't run a petting zoo. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.